Once upon a time, in a lush and vibrant forest, filled with tall, ancient trees that reached up to the sky and carpeted with soft moss and blooming flowers, a gentle breeze whispered through the leaves, telling stories of the many creatures that called this magical place their home. The forest was alive with the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, and the soft footsteps of deer, rabbits, and other woodland animals. This forest was their world, their sanctuary, where they lived in harmony with nature, respecting the delicate balance that sustained them all. In the heart of this forest, on a warm spring day, something extraordinary happened. Deep within a thicket, where the sunlight barely reached, a mother deer, known as a doe, lay hidden, her soft brown eyes filled with a gentle warmth. Her name was simply Mother, as she was known to all the creatures of the forest. And on this day, she had a special surprise. A new life was about to begin. With the arrival of dawn, the first rays of the sun filtered through the leaves, casting a golden glow over the forest floor. And there, nestled beside Mother, lay a tiny, delicate fawn, his coat a soft light brown with white spots that glistened like stars. His legs were long and spindly, making him appear a little awkward, but his eyes were large and full of wonder as they took in the world for the very first time. This was Bambi, the new prince of the forest. The forest soon buzzed with excitement as the news of Bambi's birth spread. All the animals, big and small, came to see the newborn prince. The wise old owl, known as Friend Owl, flapped his wings in approval. Thumper, the mischievous young rabbit with a habit of thumping his foot on the ground, hopped over with glee.
Look, look!
Thumper exclaimed, his nose twitching with excitement.
He's trying to stand up!
Bambi, still wobbly on his legs, tried to rise. But every time he did, his legs seemed to have a mind of their own, slipping and sliding beneath him. But with a little encouragement from his new friends and his mother's gentle nudge, Bambi finally stood up on his own. The whole forest seemed to cheer him on. For this was the first step of many that Bambi would take on his journey through life. As the days passed, Bambi grew stronger and more curious about the world around him. Mother was always by his side, teaching him about the forest, the seasons, and the many creatures that lived there. She taught him how to find food, how to recognize danger, and most importantly, how to listen to the wisdom of the forest. Bambi learned quickly, but there was so much to see and experience. One bright morning, as the sun was just beginning to rise, Bambi and his mother ventured out of the thicket and into a wide, open meadow. The grass was tall and green, swaying gently in the breeze, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of wildflowers. Bambi had never seen anything so beautiful. He pranced through the meadow, feeling the cool grass beneath his hooves, and laughed with delight as he chased after butterflies. But the meadow was not just a place of play. It was also a place where Bambi would learn some of life's most important lessons. As they grazed, Mother suddenly raised her head, her ears twitching, her eyes sharp.
Bambi,
She said softly.
we must go. We must always be careful in the meadow. It's a place of beauty, but also a place of danger.
Bambi didn't understand, but he trusted his mother. As they made their way back to the safety of the trees, Bambi noticed something strange. The other animals were disappearing into the forest, and a strange, ominous silence fell over the meadow. It was as if the very air had changed, growing heavy and still. Bambi's heart began to race, though he didn't know why. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the forest, a sharp, frightening sound that Bambi had never heard before. His mother nudged him urgently, and they both ran as fast as their legs could carry them. Bambi's heart pounded in his chest, not from the running, but from the fear that now gripped him. They didn't stop until they were deep in the forest, where the trees were thick and the light was dim.
What was that, Mother?
Bambi asked, his voice trembling.
That was Man.
Mother replied, her voice calm but serious.
Man brings danger to the forest. We must always be careful and stay away from him.
Bambi didn't fully understand what Mother meant, but he knew one thing for sure. Man was something to be feared. From that day on, Bambi was more cautious, always listening to the forest and staying close to his mother. As the seasons changed, so did Bambi. Spring turned to summer, and summer to autumn, and with each passing day, Bambi grew taller and stronger. His spots began to fade, and his legs became sturdy. He made new friends, like Flower, a shy skunk who loved to hide in the flowers, and Faline, a young doe who would one day become very special to him. Winter arrived, bringing with it a blanket of snow that covered the forest. Bambi had never seen snow before, and he was fascinated by the way it sparkled in the sunlight. He and Thumper spent hours playing in the snow, sliding on the ice-covered pond, and chasing each other through the snowdrifts. It was a time of joy and laughter, a time of friendship and discovery. But winter was also a time of hardship. Food was scarce, and the cold was biting. Bambi and his mother had to search far and wide for something to eat. One day, as they were foraging in the snow, they came across a patch of grass that had been uncovered by the wind. As they bent down to eat, Bambi heard a noise, a soft, almost imperceptible crunching of snow. He looked up, his ears twitching, and saw something that made his heart stop. It was Man, and he was close. Mother's eyes widened with fear. "Bambi, run!" she cried, her voice filled with urgency. Bambi didn't hesitate. He ran as fast as he could, his legs moving like the wind. The snow flew up around him as he raced through the trees, his heart pounding in his chest. But this time, he was alone. He couldn't see his mother, and fear gripped him like never before. He kept running, not knowing where he was going, only that he had to get away. The forest was a blur around him, the trees rushing past as he ran faster and faster. Finally, he reached the safety of a thicket and collapsed to the ground, his body trembling with exhaustion and fear. He looked around, but his mother was nowhere to be seen. The forest was silent. The only sound was Bambi's heavy breathing. He waited, hoping, praying that his mother would come. But she didn't. Hours passed, and the sky began to darken. Bambi was all alone. As the night fell, the cold wind began to blow, carrying with it the first flakes of a new snowfall. Bambi curled up in the thicket, his body shivering, not just from the cold, but from the loneliness that now surrounded him. He had never felt so alone, so scared. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but his mind was filled with images of his mother, and the terrifying sound of that gunshot echoed in his ears. Days passed, and Bambi wandered the forest, searching for his mother. He called out for her, but there was no answer. He felt lost and confused, not knowing where to go or what to do. But deep inside, Bambi knew that he had to be strong, that he had to keep going, just as his mother had taught him. One day, as Bambi was walking through the forest, he came across a familiar face. It was the great prince of the forest, a majestic stag with antlers that reached high into the air. The great prince was known to all the animals of the forest as a wise and powerful leader, and he had been watching over Bambi from afar.
Bambi,
the great prince said in a deep, kind voice.
Come with me.
Bambi looked up at the great prince, his eyes filled with questions. But he trusted him, just as he had trusted his mother. He followed the great prince through the forest, his heart heavy, but his spirit determined. The great prince led Bambi to a new part of the forest, a place where the trees were tall and the grass was green, even in the winter. There, Bambi met other deer, including Faline, who had grown into a beautiful young doe. Bambi and Faline became close friends, and together they explored this new part of the forest, learning and growing with each passing day. As the years went by, Bambi grew into a strong and noble stag. His antlers grew tall and proud, and he became respected by all the creatures of the forest. He had learned many things, both joyous and sorrowful, but through it all, he had become wise and courageous. One spring, as Bambi was grazing in the meadow with Faline, they heard a familiar sound, the soft rustling of leaves and the chirping of birds. But there was something else, something that made Bambi's heart race. It was the sound of danger, the sound of man. Without hesitation, Bambi called out to Faline, urging her to run. They raced through the meadow and into the forest, the sound of gunshots ringing in their ears. But this time, Bambi was not afraid. He had grown strong and wise, and he knew that he had to protect not only himself, but also Faline and the other animals of the forest. As they ran, Bambi saw flames in the distance. The forest was on fire, set ablaze by man's carelessness. The flames roared and crackled, consuming everything in their path. The animals fled in all directions, trying to escape the inferno, but Bambi knew what he had to do. He led Faline and the other animals to a nearby river where the fire could not reach them. They crossed the river, the water cool and soothing against their tired legs, and found safety on the other side. Bambi stood on the riverbank, watching the flames consume the forest, his heart heavy with sorrow for the trees and animals that had been lost. But Bambi also knew that the forest would heal, that life would return in time. He had seen the cycle of the seasons, the way the earth renews itself, and he knew that even after the darkest night, the sun would rise again. And so, Bambi stood tall and proud, a true prince of the forest. He had learned the ways of the forest, the joys and sorrows of life, and the importance of courage and wisdom. And as he looked out over the forest, he knew that he would protect it, just as the great prince and his mother had done before him. The forest was his home, and Bambi would watch over it for the rest of his days, ensuring that the balance of life continued, and that the forest remained a place of beauty and wonder for all who lived there. And so, under the watchful eyes of the stars, Bambi, now the great prince of the forest, stood beside Faline, who had become his mate. Together, they watched over their own little fawn, who lay nestled in the grass, just as Bambi had once been. The cycle of life continued, and the forest remained a place of magic and wonder, where the stories of the past were passed down to the future. As the night deepened and the forest grew quiet, Bambi and Faline lay down beside their fawn, their hearts filled with love and peace. And as they drifted off to sleep, the forest whispered its ancient lullaby, a song of life, love, and the endless circle that connects all living things. And so, dear friend, as you close your eyes and drift into sleep, remember the story of Bambi, the prince of the forest. Remember that life is full of challenges, but also full of beauty and joy. And just like Bambi, you too can find the strength within you to overcome any obstacle and grow into the person you are meant to be.